Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Weiner. I want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I'm a curator at the Noguchi Museum, and we're so excited and honored to have Dr. Henry Smith, Professor Emeritus of Japanese History at Columbia University, with us tonight to share a very special lecture on the One Mat Room. This program is being held in conjunction with a new exhibition that we opened yesterday at the Noguchi Museum, entitled Miwako Kurashima, Folding Cosmos. And that show is going to be on view through November 17th, 2024. On Thursdays at 1 and 1:30 p.m., so we had our first sessions today, Kurashima is inviting a small group of visitors to join her in the installation to share tea and conversation. And we very much hope that you're going to be able to join us for the exhibition and hopefully for some of those tea meetings as well, which you can sign up for at the front desk at the museum on the day of the program. The One Mat Room served as a profound source of inspiration for Kurashima, and I'm really delighted that Dr. Smith will be offering more context on the fascinating history and lasting significance of that important space. Some thank yous and credits. The presentation of Folding Cosmos at the Noguchi Museum is supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, in partnership with the City Council and from the New York State Council of the Arts, with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature. Additional support is provided by the Rokotai Confectionery and a grant from the Nomura Foundation. Folding Cosmos is also supported in part by the Union Foundation of Ergo Design Culture. So Dr. Smith's lecture will be about approximately 45 minutes, followed by time for Q&A. So you're welcome to enter any questions that you have into the Q&A chat box. And at the end of the lecture, time permitting, I'll read some of those questions out loud for Dr. Smith to answer. So I want to thank you again all so much for being here tonight. And I'll turn it over now to Dr. Smith. Thanks so much. So take it away.
Okay, fine. Can you hear me? Can you
Yes.
see me?
Yes,
Okay.
you're all good.
Okay, there we go. Good evening, everyone. I have to confess I've spent a long day here just struggling with the software of Keynote and my zillions of slides about the One Mat Room, but I think I'm ready to go here. You will see me in my image, if you can see my image, as if I was sitting in one corner of the One Mat Room. So let me just begin. Let me see if I can. Well, I want to begin with the fall of 2011 on September 9th, one day before the 10th anniversary of 9/11. It was, a big thing here in New York, and that was the day. The before that day, on the 9th, Miwako Kurashima held her first exhibition of the Folding Cosmos. And I had been involved with discussions with her. I was there in New York, and I gave a lecture. I gave a talk at her talk, which was held at a gallery. I think it was called Studio 3839, because it was located at 38 West 39th Street. And this is a view of what her first version of the Folding Cosmos looked like. The first of what would spin out finally to 12 to the present. And you can see can you see my cursor here? I'm not sure. At any rate, this is the alcove that she created. She always creates a structure here that represents the structure of the One Mat Room. And then in front are various an area for people to gather together, have conversation, and talk about various artworks that she includes in the exhibition. She mentioned, and she was very much aware, that this was sort of a memorial both for 9/11 but also for the following earlier the same year in 2011, the great Tohoku earthquake of March 11th of 2011. So that had already occurred. And so she intended this as a kind of memorial, which I think is important to remember. Let me just quickly give you an introduction to the one mat room and what it's like. This is a photograph of the interior as it exists today on the campus of International Christian University. And I will show you some plans, but basically this is looking toward the south, and you will see a window on the left, little window, small window, which rests above a kamidana, they call it, a place for offering for Shinto offerings. To the right, of course, is a full tokonoma, for a hanging scroll. And below, you'll see at the very bottom a tatami mat. This is why it's called the one mat room. And on the right, a shoji that opens up to a garden outside. This originally was in Takeshiro's home in downtown Tokyo. It is now in Mitaka. When Matsuura Takeshiro, let me just say simply that he was a great explorer. He was the great explorer of the northern territories, the area that was known as Ezo, which is now the island of Hokkaido. And Sakhalin was included in this, as were the Kuril Islands. It's a remarkable accomplishment that he made. He is known historically for this his exploration in his early years, in his 30s and 40s, which was in the 30s and 40s, no, 40s and 50s actually. At any rate, he left that all behind him when he settled down into his retirement home at around the age of 50 in the Kanda area, Kanda Gokencho, it was called, not just about a 5 to 10 minute walk from what is now Ochanomizu Station. And he built the one mat room, and he made then this, what you see on the screen here is called Mokuhen Kanjin. It is a book that he produced at the same time that he opened the room to commemorate his 70th birthday in January of 1887. He had been working hard the previous year to finish construction of the room with various carpenters. And on the evening of his 70th year, this was to commemorate his 70th year. A lot of people didn't live to the age of 70, but he had passed his kanreki at 60 and now his 70th year. And this was his great project for his 70th year. And it was a way really of looking forward to his death in many ways, as I will reiterate. But what he did then is to publish within the next month or two a woodblock printed book called Mokuhen Kanjin, a solicitation of wood scraps, I translate it, because the room was built out of pieces of wood that had been sent to him from friends throughout the country, each of which had a historical a history to it. Some most of them were shrines or temples, although there were other exceptions. And so at any rate, so he gathered together 91 different pieces are recorded in Mokuhen Kanjin. And this is the beginning of the book, in which here we have number one from Tokyo. It's from Ichikawa Man. It tells it gives the donor. Then it gives a history of the piece of wood. This happens to be a placard that was held above, posted above the entry to the room, and then goes on to number two at the end here. This continues on for a booklet which consisted of about 22 folio pages. The way the Japanese pages are bound, each spread is a folio. And it recorded in great detail all of the 91 pieces of wood that were, and again, some of them were actually pieces of metal or ceramics, but mostly wood that were contributed to the room. This is a plan of the room as recreated now. What the view that I showed you before was looking, this was the alcove, the side alcove. This is the proper alcove. The orientation is different now. And in the middle is the one tatami mat. But the important thing about the room is that it was bigger than one tatami mat. It had a border around it, the wooden border, I call it here. He called it the gakubuchi, which is an architectural term, meaning a frame for a window or a door, or today a picture. A gakubuchi is a picture frame. So the actual area of the room was more than a single tatami space. It was about 1 2/3, which is exactly the size of the smallest tea room to which it is sometimes compared. At the bottom, you see the entrance corridor, meaning that it was a lean-to structure added to his home in Kanda Gokensho, looking out over a garden. So to the area to the east over here is a garden. In addition to the side alcove and the tokonoma that I showed you before, it included a bookcase on this side and an entry to the study through fusuma doors on the bottom side. This is a view from Mokuhen Kanjin. He included 2 very important drawings of what the room was like, and it gives you a wonderful sense of how he understood the room. It was a study. It was a shosai in Japanese. It was not a tea room. He was not a tea aficionado, and he's never known to have particularly performed tea, but it was a place for him to study, and it was a very comfortable place to study. On the upper left is a window to the south, a large window, which he thought was important because it brought in sunlight during the day. Down below are all the implements that he needed for living in the room as a study. This desk to the left here has all his writing implements. It has books of paper that he can write in, and ink stone, brushes. And here in the middle is a hibachi with a pair of metal chopsticks to handle the brazier. And on the lower right here is a whole set of tea equipment that he could prepare tea for himself or offer it to any guests. It is a room that is very comfortable with 3 people. That's about the limit. But he would often invite friends, obviously, to come and join the room with him. You will notice over to the left here a whole series of symbols. These are all katakana symbols. Each one of the katakana symbols corresponds to various pieces that you find labeled here. And it gives a number that corresponds to the entry in Mokuhen Kanjin, in which he describes who gave the piece, where it was from, and its historical meaning. This is another very important image from Mokuhen Kanjin from outside, as if you went out to the garden and were looking toward it. Remember, it's a lean-to structure on a main house. And here you see exactly all these different things being described. If you look closely, you can see to the right here, the part that I described before, the kamidana on the north side, on the cold side, and various books down below here. The third image was from outside, looking through the southern window with the shutters open. And you see this, you see a whole stack of books here in the middle. And again, every piece of wood is identified by the indication of with a katakana and a reference to Mokuhen kanji. This is what the room looks like today, exquisitely maintained by International Christian University, where it now resides, with a scroll in the tokonoma as should be proper. And this is looking out toward the garden. The area we were just looking at was behind us here in the corner where his study was located. In studying the room, I devoted an immense amount of time trying to locate every single piece. And in the publication that resulted in 1993, these were some of the photographs that you see that showed exactly which piece related to where in Mokuhan kanji, so you can tell where it came from. So this was the idea to, well, here's just one example. For example, there's a beautiful piece of wood above the north window, which comes from the tree of a particular site in the Izu Peninsula, a Byakuren it's called, a hardwood tree, which has a history of its own. And each one went on like this. In the in Mokuhen kanji, he at the very end, after recording all the pieces of wood, he had a section, just 2 folios, called the kabegaki. This was kabegaki means wall writing. It means a declaration, a manifesto. And this describes what he envisioned when he created the one-mat room. And if you can forgive me while I pull up my notes here. Just a second. Hold on. I'm sorry for the delay here. Oh, okay, yeah, so here we have it. So this is his statement of what he was trying to do. And I just want to read you the text because it gives you a good idea of what his intentions were. So it begins on the right with a passage. He says, "In my youth, I walked the length of the 60-odd provinces and on as far as Ezo, the word for Hokkaido at the time, and Karafto, the Sakhalin Peninsula, a single pack upon my back. But almost 40 years have passed since I settled here in Tokyo, where I now live in Kanda-go-Kensho, as if in a grave site." This is very interesting. He's anticipating his death, basically. So this is a place where he's just waiting to die in a way, but trying to do something creative along the way. "Now I have added to this house," this is the first page here, it's all the text I'm reading. "I've added to this house a room the size of a single tatami mat. This is not just to be eccentric." The word here is monozuki. This is not to be, just a fancy. The idea is simply that in adding this room to the current total, this is of the house he lived in, of 18½ mats, the total will come to 19½ in this way, it falls short of the fullness of 20. This is a kind of a play here that he wanted not to have it perfect. He didn't have to be the quota to his house. He then has a quote from a Chinese poet near the end here, which says, "Why do you need 4 acres of land when you only need 2 cups of rice a day? Why live in a vast palace when you sleep in a 6-foot bed? In other words, what's the point of a large dwelling? And then he goes on to say, I feel at peace here, like a tiny book louse, or bookworm, literally, resting undisturbed in his borrowed home. He then quotes from the Manyoshu about how living in an immutable rock dwelling is just like being a passerby. In other words, it's the fragility of dwelling, of living in a single space. The just a second, hold on. And the second spread here, continuing, the text says, I have made this room by piecing together old scraps of wood that were sent to me from friends in various provinces. Thus it serves as a way for remembering my friends day and night, reminiscing on who gave this piece, who gave that. This is a wonderful idea that he looks around, he sees a piece of wood, he remembers a friend. So it is this whole huge social network within which he is living in this space. In this way, I do not forget the generous spirits of my friends and have managed a way to tell others about their fine words and deeds. I did not presume to build it with the thought that it might survive for later generations. It was not meant to be a permanent structure. Then he says, with this new year, I reach 70 years of age. He was writing this on the New Year's Eve, where he turned 70 from 1886 to 1887. And I can no longer bear the chill of winter days before a north-facing window. So I have built this one room with a good exposure to the sun. This refers to, as you see in the background here, the large window on the south side. He then has a reference to the Lotus Sutra, in which the phenomenal world is compared with a burning house. So there is no salvation in it. He seems to be saying that there is no salvation in a dwelling, in a permanent dwelling. He then goes on in the final sections here to say, when I die, I would ask that this place be torn down, the wood used to burn my remains, and the ashes then removed to Mount Odai. I'll come back to Odaigahara in the Kii Peninsula later. It is within this mind that I have composed these words. And then he quotes some of his own poems. He was not a great poet. His poems were actually very prosaic, but for that reason, very easy to understand. And on this right-hand page near the end is one in which he says, Obotsukana, pare nimo toamashika, ika ni shite, hajime mo hate mo, shirenu wagami ni. In my uncertainty, whom should I ask? In what way have I come? And how will I end? Then next on the following page, he says he has written this text by lamplight on the evening of the last day of 1886. And he writes another poem, a final poem. Yono naka ni tsureawan mizo yasukaran kureyuku toshi no itonami mo naku. Out of tune with the rest of the world and happy for it, as the old year passes, I forego the usual ceremony. And then he signs it at the end, Hiromu, his given name, master of the Kusanoya, an alternate word for the one-mat room that he used. I just wanted to indicate here the importance of where he lived and where he died. He was from, I hope you can see my cursor here, in Matsusaka, and in the area around Matsusaka, what is now Mie Prefecture. And he was very familiar with, he traveled all over Japan constantly in the first 20 or 30 years of his life. He was a Buddhist priest to begin with, a Zen Buddhist priest, traveling particularly in Western Japan. Then he decided he wanted to go north. And he gave up his priestly pretensions. But this is the central part of Japan. Here you see Kyoto, Osaka, and the Kii Peninsula was very important to him into the latter history of the room. So he was from the area, Matsusaka, on the road to Ise Shrine. And I'll come back later to the importance of the Wakayama area as well. Old Aigahara, which he mentioned as the place where he wanted his remains to be taken, is in the tip of the Kii Peninsula here, you see. It's very important because it is well, let me see. If you look closely at the river patterns here, it is the rainiest place in all Japan. It had been explored by virtually no one, and he took it upon himself to climb the mountain and explore it. And you can see the rivers spreading out from Odaigahara. Basically, the waters in Japan, the wettest place in Japan, spread out to the most sacred areas of Japan. So here you see Odaigahara. The waters go down to Kumano Shrine to the south, over to Mount Koya in this direction, and down to Ise Shrines on the other. So the water from Odai, in which he wanted his remains to be scattered, spread the water throughout all the most sacred sites of Japan. It's an amazing conception. This is the monument for him. It's the second historically of two that were created at the top of Mount Odai. I went there. It took a bit. You can find it if you really try. It's not that easy. It's the second monument, and some of his ashes were eventually by his family and his followers distributed there. But it's a very heavily forested, very wet, sort of gloomy place. Now you can go up in an express bus. It's not very difficult. But in his time, it was a mysterious place. It was a place to be opened up for colonization, he thought. And the place where he wanted his remains to end up, with all his ashes spreading out the most sacred parts of Japan. This is the only known photograph of Takeshirō, taken in just after his 60th birthday in 1882, I believe. And you see, it was obviously a formal occasion. I think he realized that he was in his 60s, getting older. So we had a photograph taken of him in a studio. You see this amazing necklace around his neck. He was a great connoisseur of magatama beads created by the Ainu and other northern peoples in Japan. And he made this necklace. On the right, you see it survives today in the museum, the Seikado Museum, with all these, very elaborate, beautiful beads, which became, it's been much talked about, much admired. Here you see from the Seikado Museum a layout of the beads. He was a great expert in in magatama beads, the carved beads, as he was of many different kind of antiquities. Okay, so that was the introduction that I gave at Miwako Kurashima's first showing of her folding cosmos in 2011, the fall of 2011. Now she is giving the final version of the folding cosmos this fall, beginning yesterday, you see, October 16th. I think there's a wonderful symmetry that I gave the talk at her first exhibition here in New York, and now I'm giving a talk at her last exhibition. So what, 13 years later, a long time, here again in New York, and I'm very pleased to be able to do this. I want to give a plug for a little booklet that she wrote that is available in the Noguchi Museum bookshop, I gather, called Folding Cosmos, a small part of infinity. And what inspired her about the one mat room was that so much was compressed into one small space. So she says, calls it a small part of infinity. Folding cosmos means that different dimensions are folded into one space, which it makes a cosmic space in itself. It can be taken in various ways. I now jump abruptly. I'm sorry, the label didn't come out properly here. I want to now go through quickly something that I could not do in her first exhibition, and that is to give you a brief survey of the history of the one mat room after Takeshiro's death. It went through a period of rediscovery at several stages. And it's an interesting story. It's all told in great detail in the book that I wrote and with colleagues at International Christian University published in 1993. But just to show you, excuse me for the label is not clear here. Tokugawa Yorimichi, this distinguished gentleman that you see on the left, was in the direct line of the daimyo of Ki. This is one of the three, the so-called Sankei, they call them, the three daimyo domains that would be the heirs should the main Tokugawa line fail. Ki was one, the Wakayama Peninsula that you've seen a map of. Another was Nagoya, Owari area, and the other was Mito, up to the northeast of Tokyo. Yorimichi was a very interesting person. He, as an aristocrat, basically, of the daimyo rank, essentially, although there were no daimyo anymore. He studied in England at Cambridge, spoke fluent English, had a taste for cigars, horse riding, and things of that sort. And here you see him probably about the time that he discovered the one mat room. This was on the occasion in 1906 when he happened to visit an exhibition of maps in Japan. And among those maps were a number of those by Matsuura Takeshirō of the Northern Territories. Exquisitely detailed maps, which survive today, both in written and printed form. And he thought, incident in 1906, this is after the Russo-Japanese War. The Japanese were very interested in the northern border between Japan and Russia, by which Japan had received the southern part of Sakhalin and most of the Kuril Islands. This remained territorial. This is still disputed today, as a matter of fact. At any rate, so there was a political meaning to this, but he was very impressed by these beautiful maps. So he then decided so Tokugawa Yorimichi had two passions. One was for historical preservation. And he was really a pioneer in this respect in Japan. Near the end of the Meiji period, he set up a whole formal organization for historical preservation. And this was the beginning of what is now a very elaborate system of historical preservation in Japan. He also was interested in books, in modern libraries of the sort that he saw in Europe and wanted to recreate in Japan. This is the building, the modern library that he created near his home in Azabu in the southwestern area of Japan and in a hilly area, a beautiful modern building that was named the Nanki Bunko. Nanki refers to the Wakayama area, southern Ki. Bunko is a library. It was a very fancy building. It was completed in 1909 and was really the first modern private library in Japan. Meanwhile, he had seen the one mat room himself, and through his assistants, one of whom was devoted to the library itself, and another who managed the estate of the Ki inheritance. he managed to arrange for the Matsuura family, which had survived after the death of Takeshirō, 2 years after he built the one-mat room in 1988, 1888. His house in Kanda was maintained by his son Kazuo and then by his grandson Magota. And Takeshirō, because Yorimichi, the Tokugawa descendant, had visited the home and seen the one-mat room and was very interested in it. And the upshot of all this was that in 1909, there was this is a map of the Nanki Bunko. This is the main reading room. This is a storage area of stacks here. And here, way in the backyard, was the, wait a minute, was what they called the Matsuura Takeshirō Memorial Room, the Kinenshitsu, which was basically a new structure, just a 4.5 mat structure, to which the one-mat room was attached. And this was transformative. This is what the one-mat room had been virtually unknown to anybody until this point. Now it became known throughout Japan. In a big ceremony in 1909, one of the people visiting was the lady who would later become the Empress of Japan, Nagako. And many distinguished people saw the one-mat room. So it acquired this, this is truly a discovery, a rediscovery of it. And the room to which it was attached had various maps belonging to Takeshirō, and again, emphasizing his importance as an explorer of the North. I jump now way forward to my discovery of the one-mat room. After I'll fill in a bit, but I found the one-mat room. I was awakened to it when I was in Japan from 1985 to 1987. I was then teaching at the University of California in Santa Barbara, where the Center for UC-wide Study Abroad was located. And the study center in Japan was at International Christian University, a very important private university founded in the early post-war period. In the second year that I was at ICU, I taught a course every semester, and I decided to teach a course on the local history of the local area around ICU. And so for the first time, I approached, as you see here in the photograph, this an estate really is what it was, called Taizanso. Taizan refers to Mount Fuji because you had a view of Mount Fuji in the distance. And I can't go into all the details of the complications of this, but basically it was created by this describes some. This is the text that is appears at the entrance, but it was acquired. The one-mat room itself was acquired from the Tokugawa family after the earthquake of 1923. In that earthquake, the Nanki Bunko did fine, but the Tokyo University Library was completely destroyed, and Yorimichi donated the entire collection to Tokyo University. Meanwhile, he still had the one-mat room, which he took to a new residence of his in the Yoyogi area in the backyard. He then sort of provided a new addition to it, which is the existing Kofukyo tea room, using pieces of wood coming from the key area. It's not very interesting architecturally or historically, frankly, but it is the place to which the one-mat room is now attached. now I leap again. So there was this period of the message of which is there was a period from roughly 1909 until 1925 in which the one mat room became famous. It was very widely known. Then it passed really into oblivion in many ways. I discovered it myself as I mentioned, when I was at ICU in the spring of 1987, but that didn't make it particularly famous. So meanwhile, I just want to show you some slides of the way in which the one mat room, and particularly the accomplishments of Takeshirō in general, have come back into great interest in basically since around let me see, I'm trying to find this is the Matsuura Takeshirō Kinenkan, the museum devoted to Matsuura, which was created in 1994 in the local area in which he was born. So it was a project of the local provincial cultural interests. It's a wonderful museum, and it has held continuing exhibitions. And it was this museum that then sponsored what was the first of a series of major exhibitions in about Takeshirō and the one mat room. This was one which was sponsored by the Kinenkan, the Memorial Museum, which is still a thriving institution, and was made use of the large collection of family inherited objects from the Matsuura family, living just nearby in Onoi-cho in the Matsusaka area. It included all sorts of wonderful objects. And this catalog then was it was an exhibition that went to mostly first it was shown in Matsusaka and Mie Prefecture, but then it was shown in Hokkaido. So this coincides. This is in 2011 we're talking about. This is a period in which there was a growing interest in Japan in the indigenous peoples of the North, namely the Ainu. Huge amount of new research. And Takeshiro's books and drawings were one of the most precious, and maps particularly were one of the most important kind of resources. So this was an exhibition. So it began to be known more widely. It was not about the one mat room, although information about it was included. That waited until the year 2011, when a company named Enax, which makes plumbing and ceramic materials, just like Toto, which makes the washlets. Enax had and still has a series of museums that they operate in Osaka, Nagoya, and Tokyo. And this is a view of the cover of the catalog that they issued for this new exhibition in 2010. That was the inspiration for Miwako Kurashima's venture. She saw the exhibition in its final venue. It went from Osaka to where I saw it, to Nagoya, and then to Tokyo. And she saw it in Tokyo in late 2010, early 2011. And this was what inspired her. She just thought she was so taken by the idea of a single condensed space that she could work from as an artist. Since this is a advertisement, a postcard actually that they issued for the exhibition, and as it says on the right, it says the Bakumatsu no Tankenka. He was the explorer of the Bakumatsu period, Matsuura Takeshirō, and the one mat room. And the one mat room appears very dominant, as does the image itself in the middle. So now this is the first time that the one mat room, ever since the Nanki Bunko, the demise of the Nanki Bunko, that it really achieves a new celebrity. And that has really continued until the present day. Then there appears in 2013 a catalog of a collection of objects left by Takeshirō that had been collected by an early Mitsui family member and remain to this day in the museum called Seikado Bunko, located down in sort of a difficult to reach area in southeastern Tokyo, but now a new museum right in the center of town. And they had this remarkable exhibition. As you see, the Matsuura, it's the Matsuura Takeshirō collection. And it included not only the Magatama necklace, of which you see a detail here, but also many of the objects that were depicted in the Neihanzu. I haven't talked about this, but one of the other great projects of Takeshirō in his late years was to have a painting of him done as if he were dying like the Buddha. He was still alive. That's something that I just don't have time to go into here, but I wrote a long article about it, and which I will provide a reference at some time later. Then further on, there was another exhibition later that was exclusively in Hokkaido, both in Sapporo and in two different museums actually, which were donated to devoted to the Ainu people. So again, it's this huge interest in Hokkaido history and in the Ainu people in particular that resulted in a new resurgence of interest in Matsuura Takeshirō. The bottom of the reverse side of this catalog was from a painting that Takeshirō did. It was very tall, about 6 to 8 feet tall, and about 3 to 4 feet wide, very detailed, showing the area of Mount Odai in the middle. This is the Odai region. It's a remarkable painting, but it shows his preoccupation with this particular area, where he hoped that his remains would go permanently. And I thought I had a detail here. I guess I missed it, but in the far distance, if you go up far enough, yeah. There we go. Yeah. So in the far distance, you can see a very long view way up across the inland sea, and you can see Mount Fuji here, actually. So it's this kind of expansive vision that Takeshirō had. He could see very tiny things very closely, and he could see things very, very broadly. It was a remarkable thinker in many ways. This is a waterfall that's located near the center of the Odai region, and this is Mount Odai itself. Yeah, okay, this is the detail where you see Mount Fuji in the distance with ships along the way. This is Ise Bay, basically. I mentioned earlier that as a result of my tremendous interest in the history of the one mat room, I spent about 2 or 3 years studying it closely, traveling to every single one of the many locations that the pieces of wood came from, and working closely with the staff of the Yuasa Museum, Memorial Museum on the ICU campus. Professor Theodore Kidder, Ted Kidder, an archaeologist who was a pioneer in the archaeology of that particular area of Tokyo, was a great supporter. But even more important was Akiko Fukuno, who is still at the museum. She's formerly retired, but still active there, who did all the tremendous work to design the book. And I also need very much to mention Yasunami-san, Hirokazu Yasunami, who was a graduate student in ICU in art history at the time in the early 1990s, and who translated my entire English text into Japanese. So it's a completely bilingual volume. Yasunami-san is now at the Idemitsu Museum in downtown Tokyo, a very important museum, and now a distinguished art historian and curator. The final event was in the fall of what year was this? 1913, I believe. Yeah, at ICU itself, they held a special exhibition in the fall of that year about the one mat room, as you've seen, from September until November. It's a beautiful catalog, and I gave a talk then, as did many other people, about the accomplishments of Takeshirō. So this was the point is that because of the interest in Hokkaido in particular and Takeshirō's achievements, exploits in the North, the one mat room itself comes back into view very much so. And one part of the project at ICU for this exhibition was to create a replica of the one mat room. So here you see it. It was done by very skilled carpenters. It's not exactly precise, it needn't be, but it's of all the same dimensions. It's done with pure Japanese carpentry, and it remains there today in the museum. If you visit the Yuasa Museum in Mitaka, you can go there and you can step into the room itself, sit in it, and see what it might have felt like to experience it. Well, I think I've run out of slides. I have run out of slides. That's really the conclusion. And so finally, I want to thank Miwako for giving me the occasion to talk about the one mat room again, and to congratulate her on the final installation of her folding cosmos, which I hope many of you will have a chance to see. I will be going myself on Saturday. And to bring full circle, as I mentioned, the project that she began in 2011, now in 2024. But the inspiration originally for her entire project was the one mat room, and I hope that this has enabled you all to learn something. I'm sorry for rushing along here about its history and its continual rediscovery. And Miwako's own activities have been a final chapter in this discovery. Thank you very much.
Dr. Smith, thank you so much for that wonderful lecture. We appreciate it so much. If you want to just hit play on your slides again so we can see if anyone has any questions, we can go back through. But please feel free to enter any questions you might have in the Q&A box, and I can read those out loud to anyone in the audience. I'd just ask you a question to kick us off. I wonder, in all these years of studying the one mat room and also thinking about it in relation to Miwako's project, if you're thinking about it has changed or evolved at all, especially being able to give this lecture 13 years apart. I wonder if, your thinking has changed about it at all.
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer is not really. I mean, from the very beginning, I got the idea of creating a very small space into which the memory of all your friends and the history of all Japan was condensed. That idea was clear from the start, and it was a remarkable conception. And so, no, I don't think I've really changed. What has been interesting as a historian is to see the way in which, again, it's been rediscovered in different periods, the Nanki Bunko period, and then most recently in the huge interest mainly in Takeshirō as an explorer of the North. International Christian University has continually promoted it. in various ways. They have a Taizanso club there, and if you have the proper connections, you can actually get into the one mat room. I think every fall at the annual student festival, the Gakuensai, they do actually let people visit the one mat room. It's they have to take care of it. It's a fragile place. Um, but yeah, I think it's what's more interesting is the way in which interest in it has come and gone and remains very strong. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A box, but if I'm missing them somehow, please also feel free to raise your hand, any of the attendees that are here, and I can try and get those questions as well. Oh, okay, one just came in from Matt Kirsch, my fellow curator at the Noguchi Museum, and he has asked, are you aware of any particular eccentric studies that Takeshirō Matsuura may have responded to or been inspired by?
Wait a minute, what is that again?
Are you aware of any particular eccentric studies that Takeshirō Matsuura may have responded to or been inspired by?
That any studies? I'm not sure I quite understand the question. I mean,
Matt, do you want to add anything else?
yeah, well, I mean, Takeshiro has been extensively studied now. I mean, the materials that he left, particularly of his explorations to the north, are huge number. And many of them are preserved now at the museum dedicated to him, the Matsuura Takeshiro Kinenkan in Matsukata, in Matsaka. And in particular, the one thing that I didn't have any time to talk about was the Nehanzu, the painting that he had made for him in precisely the period in which he was building the one mat room by the great painter Kawanabe Kyosai. It's a remarkable painting. The very conception of depicting someone as if they were dead when they were still alive was actually learned, it turns out, from Sengai, the great painter in Kyushu. But it was a remarkable feat of the imagination, an incredibly interesting painting in which Takeshiro is shown as though he's laying on the bier when he's died. People are mourning around him, including many of his toys, of people from the paintings that he had collected, various little objects that are shown there that he had collected. So he's with all his things, basically. And it's a beautiful painting. It was displayed recently in Tokyo in an exhibition at the new branch of the Seikado Bunko Museum, which was established in Marunouchi just last spring. And just to see that again, and a lot more people have been able to see it. I wrote a long article about this for the journal Impressions. And if you just go to my website, just go Henry Smith, Columbia University, you will see a link on the right to my publications. And in that, you will find this article, both one on the well, basically one on the Nehanzu, the painting, the Nirvana painting of him as if he were dead when he was still alive. It's a remarkable story, but that would require a whole other talk.
Okay, we've had another question from the audience. This one is from Samuel Koo, and they've said, thank you for the presentation. Do you see the one mat room as especially linked to any movement or moments in Japanese or global philosophy or intellectual history?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, it's not that cosmic an idea after all, but I think there was something about what was changing in the Meiji period. He was very much a traditional person. He was extremely well educated in the classics, but he was also very forward-looking. So I think there was something about this conception. to put it in larger philosophical context, I'm not so sure, but I'm sure you could do something of that sort. This sort of thing had never been done, and I think there was something about the way Japan was changing from the mid to the late Meiji period when he lived. New forms of transportation. He still walked everywhere, of course, and I think that transition, the great transition in modern Japanese history in the 1880s into the 1890s, when they were, I mean, the whole world was changing, of course, at that time with the introduction of trains and electricity. But he represents a different aspect of this, and it was philosophical in many ways. But I'd be hard put to pinpoint it. But I don't think he could have imagined that sort of thing were it not for the beginnings of modernization in Japan.
Okay, I see Miwako is also raising her hand. So I'm gonna press this button to allow to talk. So Miwako, I think you can unmute yourself and ask a question if you would like, or speak to your work, whatever you'd like. You just have to hit the unmute button by clicking audio.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. I so much appreciate for Dr. Smith and Kate. And the installation of Holding Cosmos is totally new and it's so much close to the original. So I do hope that you can enjoy the updated and final Holding Cosmos at the Noguchi Museum this occasion. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Miwako. We're so delighted to have this exhibition up at the museum and honored. And Dr. Smith, it's truly been a pleasure and honor to hear this talk. And yeah, thank you to everyone in the audience again for joining. And we really do hope you'll be able to come visit us at the museum to see this special exhibition. I did also want to mention that Dr. Smith's lecture has been recorded and we'll be putting a link to that up on our YouTube page. So if you want to go back and hear any part of it again, that will be available. But thank you again so much and have a great rest of your evening.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much. Bye.
Bye.